Sup people, Sam here, aka the guy who completely fails at bringing any emotion into his voice when sitting alone in his room and talking to a microphone all by myself. Yeah. Control blocks. This video is about control blocks. We will be pushing creativity to its limits once again. I will be going into tutorial mode a few times throughout the video, but I will be keeping it very brief. If you want a full tutorial, I have posted one by Futile, great channel, in the description. Control blocks are very simple tools of cause and effect. I use them all of the time, they are brilliant, they bring so much of flexibility to the game. And I'm going to share some of that with you. Intro tutorial on how to use them, you find them right here in the control tab. Here they are, ACBs. Just point them down and then you can press Q to interact with them. Here you have the conditions tab, that is the cause, where you can select what cause it listens to. Here you have the target and action, that is what order or what action it's going to execute when the condition is fulfilled. And a few other things, search patterns, context control input, etc. We will be going into that. One of the most basic tool that probably everyone is using is the Flare launcher. So what you're looking at right now is the first plane I ever built. It's a Cram Bomber. It's far over a year old, but as you can see if you look in the cockpit, it already uses control blocks. Though we are not interested in those one just yet. We will be looking at the one in the back here. It's probably the first thing all of us used ACBs for. If enemy missiles are in range, we'll fire weapons. In this case, we'll drop flares and radar decoys as defense. So as you can see right now, it's dropping flares behind it. It's not helping because the flares are way too small and the plane is kind of shit, but it's the idea that matters, right? Also, another useful thing for defense is that if laser attack, then smoke dispensers release, so that if you're being attacked by lasers, you can just do this and quickly hide in the smoke. Something that's very useful for efficiency, and for some reason I use it right here on my main base, is to turn off your steam engines when your batteries are full, or at least your steam generators here. It's a simple case of if your battery is within 0 to 50%, you turn on your steam engines, and right here, if the battery is above 50%, then I turn them off. Obviously you can vary this percentage however you want. That way, for example, if you have a half RTG, half steam powered craft, for movement it won't use the steam engine, but as soon as it gets in combat, uses a ton of energy on pack or railguns or whatever, then it will turn on the steam engines and burn the resources, but give you a lot more power in combat. Very convenient. This magnificent craft right here is using thrust vectoring. As you can see in the back, the nozzle of the jet engine is moving around. If you go into the jet engine setting, here under extra configuration, you can change the yaw angle as well as the pitch angle to move it up or down. This is originally intended so you can align the thrust with the center of mass so that there is no unbalance, like we are suffering from right now because our craft is taking off and flipping itself on its back. I will go into caps lock mode real quick. Anyways, if we reveal the control box here real quick, we see we have one listening to, all three of them listen to the yaw command. This one is yaw command none. So if I don't press any key, it will reset it back to the center position. And those two listen to right and left and set the yaw to the respective angle. You can do the same thing with pitch, obviously. Unfortunately, you cannot directly feed like pitch or yaw commands like those into this, so you have to go through the control blocks, and obviously the more axes you want to have, the more control blocks you need, but it's still very useful, especially in a craft like this, which has a lot of power. You get a lot of authority for pitching and yawing that you wouldn't get, for example, out of wings or that kind of stuff. Also, you can change aesthetic settings. So if you want, you can change around the lighting on your ship, for example. I mean, people spend a ton of money to RGB their computers, so why not RGB your ship? Unfortunately, I don't have any examples for that, but if you look at information like ACB taking damage, for example, my right side is getting destroyed, so I have to turn around to my other side. Information about the enemy, am I fighting a plane or am I fighting a ship? You can find that out by range or speed. Stuff like that, enemy bearing, and depending on that you can, here on mainframes, you can decide different things, different behaviors, etc, etc. Very, very optional. I haven't used it that much yet. It's a thing, it's great, but unfortunately I cannot give you any example of that right now. But you can look into it for yourself. If you have a block name listening to the vehicle altitude, and such as these two, you can deploy balloons on your plane in case you ever crash to the ocean. So, as soon as we reach 30 meters of altitude, it should deploy the balloons. There you go, which pull us back into the surface and allow us to perform an air start. Good job, plane. Good job. It's completely tore itself apart by ramming into the station. Awesome. Yeah, let's just jump to the next point. What we have here is a clip from the Helios back in the day when I was still thinking about giving it fighter drones, before I thought that they would just be too overpowered. What's happening is that we, in order to not have them collide with each other, we first increase the range on the docking station before releasing the drones. If you improve their timing a bit, so by increasing the range but releasing the docked craft before it reaches that range, you have this right here, which is a hydroponics bay, also from the Helios. Lore-wise, the entire craft is designed to protect this hydroponics bay and the plants that are inside. So when the craft is too damaged to keep it alive, it will trigger the emergency ejection, where the whole hydroponics bay just flies away, fires its jet engines and flies to safety, while the husk of the Helios goes down fighting and tries to destroy the opponent with everything that it has left. This is an earlier version that I was planning to do. It uses a parachute, and I actually set up the advanced control blocks to deploy the parachutes and everything. Unfortunately, the sails have to have this this angle here. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to fit the sails into the main hull, or maybe I could have put them on the bottom, but that would be very, very complicated. Use a lot of ACBs, a lot of spin blocks, and yeah, the effect is all right, but it isn't great, and especially when you it's not a parachute. A parachute doesn't have massive long sticks that sort of turn into shape like they do here. So it didn't have the right feel for parachute. It looks cool, but in the end I went for the purely propulsive system in the end. Speaking of distance on docking stations, I have right here 3 control blocks listening to complex controls. So that way on my infamous boxing gloves I can push them out and pull them in a little bit and thus hit more accurately whatever I'm trying to punch. That video was hilarious. By the way, if you are wondering why I have these control blocks on both of these docking stations here. By the way, if you are wondering why I have those control blocks on both turrets right here, is because spin blocks cannot act downwards in the sub-object tree. So if we have a turret here and we put a control block onto it, this control block cannot interact with this turret or the main ship or any other turret on the main ship. All it can act are things that are sitting on top of this turret, including smaller turrets. So this control block can interact with this turret and everything that is on top of this turret. Though, if we put another one on here, this control block can now only interact with things that are on this turret, not this turret itself. This control block can interact with this turret, but not this one. And if we put one down here, it can interact with, well, everything that is on this ship. Assuming obviously we have the range set to maximum. As soon as you pull down the range, it completely ignores everything that is on sub-objects, even if those sub-objects are within this range. Tutorial bit over, let's keep going. For some reasons you might have to turn on or off your guns. For instance, right here, I don't want the gun to start shooting while the gates are closed, so I have this control block listening to the same commands as this one, though with a time delay of 4 seconds here. And after 4 seconds it will activate the receivers. You can turn on or off those receivers right here, which and if the receiver is turned off, that means that the local weapons controller cannot interact with the mainframe, doesn't get the order to fire, and thus doesn't shoot. And that way you can turn your entire guns on or off, including the targeting and aiming and everything. Also something I haven't done yet but might do in the future. If you have a gun that fires a usual mix of shells, like what I'm having right here is some timed fuse flag, some hash, some disruptor conduit EMP to suppress the enemy shield, and then some timed fuse airburst frag with some smoke in there to offensively suppress the enemy lamps system. But if you are suddenly engaging a submarine, then you might have to listen here to altitude. If the enemy altitude is like below the water, then you can change ammo intakes right here to a certain ID, and that would allow you to load super cavitational shells into your main battery gun, so you can fire underwater at underwater targets. The firing key, my personal favorite. You have the mother turret and the firing key on said turret, except it's turned away by 90 degrees. So if it's in idle and nothing happens, but as soon as you take manual control and the two turrets align, then the firing key closes and the gun starts firing. However, if you have turret restrictions on the mother turret but not on the sub turret, that also means that the firing key doesn't close when the mother turret is hitting the side of its firing restrictions, but the sub turret is moving on, so it's not in line anymore. That gives you basically a way to read out whether the gun is aiming at a target right now or not, which you can then use for other shenanigans like building the legendary minigun. I have another video on that on the channel where it also uses a shit ton of sub-objects to work out. Definitely watch it if you haven't yet. but you probably have because the video has like 3,000 views or something. The Helios, which hasn't changed since the last video because I've been procrastinating, also has a very interesting thing where it basically has two modes, passive mode and combat mode. And basically because the whole faction lore means that the ship is very defensive and doesn't want to engage in combat. However, as soon as it takes enough damage and it's actually under threat of being destroyed, so let's say if the health drops below 90%, it will activate combat mode. Right now combat mode is still manual by just putting a block here. That means combat mode, which means that we open up all of the gates here, reveal our missiles, reveal our defensive missile, etc. But in the end version, the condition will be vehicle stats health. If health is below 90%, which is actually the default here, it will enter this combat mode. There are in general three ways that the player can interact with the control blocks. The first one is through complex controls. It's the one that I used most of the time because I rarely am in first person, and instead I'm just sitting here on my base. I have a complex controller right here. But if you go into a control block here, you go into the advanced dim trigger tab here, and that gives you the option to bind whatever complex control you want as inputs for that control block. So these ones right here, listen to up and down. It's my drag test unit. So I have two identical jet propelled things here, and I can just put whatever blocks on top and see how the drag compares. That's how I found out the zero drag projectiles for my mass drivers. And so for instance right here we have a metal block. Right here we have a duct block, and duct blocks are incredibly broken because they reduce drag to 0.05 while having the same health and armor. Oh no, I think they have less health, right? Yes, they have only half of the health, but they have the same armor as normal blocks. But if I throw them up, you can see that the right one is much faster and just takes off into the skies. Because its duct blocks are not drag transparent, which means all of the blocks behind them are shielded. And so you could just build the entire front of your ship, just a solid wall of ducts, and you would be incredibly drag efficient and don't have to worry about slopes and that kind of stuff. So completely broken. You heard it here first, guys. Another way to interact with control blocks would be to press Q on them. That's what I use right here. Triggers when interacted, so by pressing Q when looking at them. Now if you want to change the settings, you have to enter build mode, and in build mode you can still press Q to open the menu as always, but if you are outside of build mode and you press Q on that triggers the control block. The third way to do it is with these things. These are ACB controllers. They are in the same tab right here, and you can customize them. So for example right here I have it turn around this the cabin of my bubble ship. So now we are facing forward, and if I press this button right here, we are facing backwards at the screen, which allows us to shoot backwards. This is the bubble ship from the movie Oblivion. Great movie, absolutely watch it. I'll probably do a review on this ship once it's completely finished. Right now it still has a few leftover bits. Another useful thing that you can use ACBs for is if you want to change settings on your entire ship, such as, I don't know, a smoke color for your propulsion or settings on your wheels. You can just change those settings in the ACB, press test here, and that will apply to the entire ship. Obviously right now we are on the base, we don't have any propulsion components, but sometimes it can be quite useful. Next up is animation. Under animation, I understand everything that involves moving parts, such as right here we have the bubble ship again, and if we undock it, you see that it takes the landing gear and folds the landing gear back up, and as soon as we dock again and get into range of the station, it will fold the landing gear back out. Simple as that. It serves no actual purpose, but it's just very beautiful, decorative, and you do that by basically listening to whatever input you want, right? For this one, it just has an object detection downwards. So if there is the floor or another ship on the bottom, it will trigger, and then it uses the rotate spin blocks to a certain position to fold the landing gear out and back in again. This is tutorial time once again. So right here, all of those ACBs, they don't have a condition. You can see here the condition is grayed out while the slave action is green. That means that they all listen to this block. This one is the only one with a condition. So if this condition is executed, all of these ACBs get triggered, but they can still have their own time delays or minimum activation intervals, and all have different outputs. So if I press Q right here, then you can see we first open the gates here, move the turret inside, and then close the gates again. So basically we have a sequence written here, and each of those blocks has then a slightly longer delay. I'm doing something very similar right here, where I basically have this beautiful recoil sequence where I pull back the barrel, lift it up, and then slowly lower it down and push it back forward. That's exactly the same thing, basically. Animation is probably my favorite thing to do with control blocks, because I love moving parts in general in science fiction and everything, like Transformers or Iron Man when he puts on his armor or whatever. Just stuff interacting with each other, moving parts. Absolutely love it. And that's why I also love all of the possibilities that ACB give to us, just to create something like that. Absolutely magnificent. But back to chaining ACBs together, the same thing works the other way around as well. So if we look at the mass driver, what has happened to you? Oh, there we go. I think I have so many things interacting with spin blocks around here that they are starting to influence each other. You can also have two conditions, only for one execution, which is what I'm using right here, in order to spin it, trigger everything right here. So for instance, what we're listening here, so if T is pressed and there is an object in range, so we, both of those have a condition, but only this one has an execution to release the currently held vehicle on this vehicle blueprint spawner. Now this object presence doesn't have an object, neither does this one, neither does this one. The only one that sees an object with its object I should probably explain object presence first. Let me do that real quick. Object presence is my favorite and probably the most useful thing. Basically, you give it a minimum value and a maximum value, so a range in which it looks. By default, it's 10 meters in front of the block, so it's always on the side where you have this power symbol. 10 meters in this row, it looks if there are any blocks. But you can also specify this a lot more by, for example, upping the minimum range to, I don't know what range is this, 7? Okay. So now you can have it listen to exclusively anything between 7 or 8 meters. That means that I could put or remove blocks in here and it wouldn't care. The only thing it cares about is this one block. So right now it's red, and if we put it back, let's hope it was the right one. No, it wasn't, then I'm pretty sure it's one of those. Yeah, now it's green again. That is what object presence does, and object presence doesn't care if the block is on your main craft or if it's on a different sub-object or whatever. And that's what makes it brilliant for interacting with sub-objects. So we have these guys here. They are on the sub-object, which spins every time I fire the cannon, as you can see here. But they are still looking right here, object presence. It's just looking for some of the blocks here on the cannon, and that's how the individual vehicle blueprint spawners know it's their turn to release, because only the one that is right in front of the cannons has this object presence here. Something very similar is happening around here. We have this block, which I'm going to paint red real quick. There we go. This point indicates the current position of the reloading drum, and only this one is seeing this block, and as soon as I press T, this is the only block that will trigger. You can see this one is green and the other ones are red. So as soon as I press T, this block gets triggered and will move the spin block to its next position. Now it's this guy's turn, and obviously this guy has plus 90 degrees to whatever rotation the spin block needs. And that's how I turn this reloading mechanism. Another example for that would be my rowboat. I tried to do it with breadboard. I invested maybe 2 or 3 hours trying to get this breadboard running, but I just couldn't. In the end I had like, I think 8 sinus curves, 4 of them to trigger the movement and 4 of them to actually give us the information or whatever. Doesn't matter, it sucked. So now I have a different method. I have the spin block here, which rotates at exactly the same speed as the spin block outside, and it has this block, whose only purpose it is to trigger those 2 object detection control blocks, which then set the angle of these outer spin blocks right here. So if I demonstrate here, they every half turn they move the pedals forward, and that's how I got this pretty fast pedal boat that is currently trying to drown itself underwater. Yeah, it's not yet optimized. I just got the movement out. I actually am building this for the tournament on Sunday. In case you didn't know, some Sunday, if everyone has time, the guys on the Discord and we have a little tournament just for funsies, nothing serious, where we build a couple of crafts as sometimes competitive, sometimes just for the memes, and have them fight each other. It's at 19 o'clock CET this Sunday, so the 9th, that's tomorrow, or today, depending on when I get this video out. Feel free to join. I will be streaming everything, and if you want to take part, you can also join our Discord channel, and maybe you can get your creative ideas in there as well. I still haven't even talked about how to use spin blocks as well as the object detection system to create entire computers where you can have multiple stages or even reset or stuff like that. In theory, you could build a calculator with that if you are mad enough to take it this far, but this video is already getting super long and I'm already very late with it. So you're getting that, and maybe I can get you excited enough to subscribe to my channel in order to watch the madness and the potential that you can have when you can actually program stuff using spin blocks and using ACBs. As you can see it right here, you can make switches, you can have buttons, you can change signal durations and all that kind of stuff. I already have part of the script built, but I just want to push this video out right now as is. And you'll see this in maybe not the next one, but sometime in the future. As always, I don't make promises because I know myself and I still owe you Mass Drivers Part 3 and all that kind of stuff. My work ethic is very bad and I procrastinate a ton. But yeah, I'm just rambling at this point. Like I said, stream on Sunday, 19 o'clock CET. though usually it takes quite a while for everyone to show up and make their last minute modifications to their craft. So we have a ton of time really before the tournament itself starts to just hang out and chat a bit. So if you have any questions or just want to talk, feel free to join, it would be nice. And before you go though, I have a quick question. How good are you at the game? I don't know too much about my community. To be honest, my community interactions could be a lot better. I'm trying to work on it with this question right here. Usually in my videos I assume that the player is maybe not quite as good as me with my 500 and a bit hours right now, but at least has some basic knowledge about ACBs, for example, knows, well, you don't have to know breadboard, but you should be aware that it exists, how it works, etc, etc. So in my videos I assume that if you're not that good at the game yet and you're still hey, my ships don't sink, I'm happy, you might just be completely at a loss with what I'm talking about. At the same time, I don't want to go into tutorial mode too often or for too long and go into too many details, because for one, there are people out there who do a much better job than I could ever do, like Futile, for example. He has a very good selection of tutorials on all matter of topics. And also because, yeah, and also because it's just not my thing, you know. I want to empower creativity and push people to think further, think about ideas that they couldn't maybe have come up with for themselves, and that's not something you can do if you keep sitting around on the basics. So tell me, how do you like my current style? Should I go to more detail about all the technicalities? Should I like give detailed instructions on how to replicate the stuff that I build? Or should I continue with my current style of videos where I just show off the stuff and leave a lot of the details to you to figure out for yourself? Because in the end, that's kind of what I want to do. I don't want to sell you like the full thing. I don't want to sell you frozen pizza. I want to give you the inspiration and maybe a recipe on how you can make one for yourself, because that's the only way you can learn to cook, really. And that's my overall goal. It's not to sell you stuff that I came up with. It's to empower you to come up with your own stuff and push the community as a whole further, and maybe inspire me in return. And yeah, that's what I want to achieve, and I don't think that the right way to achieve this would be by pre-digesting everything for you, and instead you know, just give you enough information that you're inspired, but little enough information that you have to really interact with the topic. At the same time though, if I give too little information, especially people who are not that good in the game might be overwhelmed. So really that's a bit of a balancing act where I'm not really sure where I am right now and where I should be or where I want to be. So yeah, write your opinions in the comments. I would be happy to know what you think about it. Also, comments boost my rating for the YouTube algorithm to pick me up. Yeah.